She is standing at a podium in Washington, D.C., in the autumn of 1942. The room is full of journalists, American journalists, mostly men who cover politics and press conferences and the managed distance of a war being fought on other continents. They have questions prepared. They look at the young woman at the podium, 26 years old, small, dark-haired, wearing a Soviet military uniform, and they ask the questions they have prepared. One asks whether she finds it difficult to wear such a masculine uniform. Another asks whether Soviet women are permitted to use makeup at the front. A third asks whether she would consider switching to a more feminine style of cap. She listens to the questions. She is fluent in these situations now, has learned, over the months of her American tour, to calibrate her patience against the particular variety of condescension being directed at her. She has been through Odessa. She has been through the siege of Sevastopol. She has faced German snipers in the rubble of 2 cities and outlasted them. She has 309 confirmed kills, the highest count of any female sniper in the history of warfare, a number that the journalists asking about her cap seem not to have fully absorbed. She waits for a pause. Then she says, simply and without apparent heat, "Gentlemen, I am 26 years old. I have already destroyed 309 fascist occupants. Do you not think, gentlemen, that you have been hiding behind my back for too long?" The room goes quiet. This is the story of how she got there. Lyudmila Pavlichenko was born in 1916 in Biela Tserkva, a city in what is now central Ukraine. She was, from early on, someone who found conventional expectations chafing. She was athletic, competitive, and interested in things that were not, in the Soviet Union of the 1930s, conventionally female, though the Soviet state, it should be said, was considerably more open to unconventional women than most of the world at that time. She began marksmanship training as a teenager at a local shooting club and discovered quickly that she was exceptionally good at it. There is a quality that the best marksmen share, a capacity for absolute stillness at the moment of action, a kind of internal quiet that allows everything else to be shut out, and Pavlichenko had it. She pursued it seriously. She earned qualifications, competed, improved. She was also a student. She enrolled at Kyiv University to study history, had a son young in a brief marriage, and was working toward a degree when the war arrived. Germany invaded the Soviet Union on June 22, 1941. Operation Barbarossa. The Eastern Front opened across a distance that dwarfed anything the war had seen in the West, and the violence that accompanied it, the sheer industrial scale of destruction on both sides, was of a different order from what Western Europe had experienced. Pavlichenko went to a recruitment office and asked to enlist as a combat soldier. The recruiter suggested she might be more useful as a nurse. She said she wanted a rifle. She was 24 years old, and she knew how to use one. The army, looking at her marksmanship qualifications, eventually agreed. She was assigned to the 25th Rifle Division of the Red Army as a sniper and deployed to the fighting around Odessa, on the Black Sea coast, in August 1941. Odessa, in the summer and autumn of 1941, was under siege by Romanian and German forces. The city held out for 73 days, a defense that became one of the early symbols of Soviet resistance, and that cost both sides enormously. Pavlichenko operated as a sniper throughout the Odessa defense. Sniper work is different from other forms of combat in ways that are easy to describe but difficult to inhabit. It is solitary work, often conducted at extreme ranges, over periods of many hours. The sniper must find and hold a firing position without being detected, must remain still, sometimes without food or water, sometimes through weather that makes stillness additionally punishing, and must wait for the precise moment that justifies everything that has come before. It is also work that requires a particular relationship with the act of killing, a willingness to make it deliberate, individual, and direct in a way that the organized chaos of infantry combat does not demand. Many soldiers who function perfectly well in firefights find they cannot do this kind of work. The separation between the aim and the trigger, filled with silence, is harder to cross than it appears. Pavlichenko crossed it. She accumulated kills in Odessa, and she also, crucially, accumulated experience in something that is often overlooked in accounts of sniper warfare: counter-sniper work. The most dangerous opponents she faced were German and Romanian snipers, experienced and patient, who were also hunting her. These engagements sometimes lasted hours, Two people in concealed positions, each waiting for the other to move, each knowing that the first to move would die. She won these engagements. The counter-sniper engagements deserve particular attention because they reveal something important about what she actually was. She was not simply a marksman, a person who could hit a target at distance. She was a hunter, in the complete sense of the word. Someone who could read terrain, understand how another predator would think, predict behavior from evidence, and use patience as a weapon. When a German sniper was operating in the rubble of Odessa, she studied the pattern of his shots, identified his likely positions, and placed herself where she could wait for him to move. The patience required for this, hours of absolute stillness, in heat, in discomfort, knowing that she was also being hunted, is not a skill that training creates from nothing. It comes from something prior. By the time Odessa fell in October 1941 and the 25th Division was evacuated by sea, she had 187 confirmed kills. She was assigned to Sevastopol. Sevastopol was worse. The siege of Sevastopol lasted from October 1941 to July 1942. 8 months of continuous combat in a city being systematically destroyed around its defenders. Pavlichenko operated throughout, living in the rubble, moving between positions, continuing the patient deadly work she had refined at Odessa. She was wounded 4 times. None of the wounds were severe enough to remove her from the line for long. She came back each time and continued. This is worth sitting with for a moment because the history of warfare is full of accounts of soldiers who returned to battle after wounds, and what it tells you is not just about physical toughness. It is about the particular attachment to the work and to the people alongside you that makes the alternative sitting out feel impossible. Pavlichenko, in her memoirs, does not dramatize these returns. She describes coming back the way she describes everything, as what needed to be done next. During the Sevastopol siege, she engaged in a series of counter-sniper operations against German specialists. Men who had been sent specifically because the Soviet female sniper operating in the ruins was becoming a problem for German troop morale and officer safety. She killed 36 enemy snipers during her career. This particular number is considered by military historians to be the more significant statistic, because it indicates not just marksmanship but the ability to win the most demanding and most dangerous form of the craft against its most skilled practitioners. By the time she was finally evacuated from Sevastopol, wounded again, ordered out by command that could not afford to lose her, both as a soldier and as the propaganda asset she had become, her confirmed kill count stood at 309. The Soviet military stopped counting at that point. She was taken out of combat. She was 25 years old. In August 1942, Pavlichenko arrived in the United States as part of a Soviet delegation attending the International Student Assembly at the White House. She was the first Soviet citizen to be officially received by an American president during the war. Franklin Roosevelt met with her. Eleanor Roosevelt was her host. The relationship that developed between Eleanor Roosevelt and Lyudmila Pavlichenko was, by any measure, unlikely. Eleanor was 61 and one of the most powerful women in America, a figure of immense political sophistication who had navigated decades of Washington's particular cruelties. Pavlichenko was 26, spoke limited English, and had spent the last year in the rubble of cities under siege. They liked each other enormously. Eleanor invited her to Hyde Park, the Roosevelt family estate, where Pavlichenko stayed for several days. They talked through interpreters about the war, about women, about what the world might look like afterward. Eleanor later described her as one of the most impressive people she had met during the war, a woman of unusual moral clarity and personal force. There is a photograph from this visit. Pavlichenko in her uniform, Eleanor in her customary print dress, the two of them standing in the garden at Hyde Park, talking to each other with the ease that sometimes develops between people who have both, in their different ways, faced things that most people have not. The photograph captures something that the official record misses. They were genuinely comfortable together. Eleanor would advocate publicly for Pavlichenko's cause, the cause being, essentially, the opening of a second front in Europe that would relieve pressure on the Soviet Union. This was what Pavlichenko had been sent to argue for, and she argued for it with the only credential that actually mattered in 1942. She had been there, and she could tell you what it cost. Pavlichenko's tour of the United States included visits to major cities, addresses to crowds, and the press conferences that have become the most quoted episodes of her public life. She was not a natural public speaker. She was a sniper, a student, a person whose work had been defined by silence and patience, but she was honest in a way that American audiences found either startling or thrilling depending on their inclination. When a journalist asked her what she thought of American women, she said she thought they should be fighting. When asked if she was afraid of death, she said she was not afraid of the death of fascists. When the man asked about her cap, she said what she said, and the room went quiet and she had made her point. She traveled to Canada and Britain before returning to the Soviet Union. She was awarded the Gold Star of the Hero of the Soviet Union, the highest military decoration in the country, and assigned to train new snipers, a role that drew on everything she had learned at the cost of everything she had endured. She trained hundreds of snipers for the remainder of the war. Whether this was harder than the combat she had been removed from is something she never said publicly. Lyudmila Pavlichenko died in 1974 at the age of 58. She had lived the post-war decades in relative quiet, working as a historian, giving occasional interviews, watching the world she had fought to preserve become the world she lived in. Her memoirs, published posthumously and translated into English, have a quality that is easy to undervalue. They are honest. She does not sentimentalize what she did, and she does not apologize for it. She went to war. She fought effectively. She came home. She continued. In Chicago, during her 1942 tour, Woody Guthrie was so moved by her story that he wrote a song. The chorus goes, Lyudmila Pavlichenko's name rings out. More than 300 Nazis she cut out. It is not a great song. It is a true one. What remains, underneath the numbers and the anecdotes and the photograph of her standing at that podium in Washington, is something harder to quantify than a kill count. It is the image of a person who looked at an impossible situation, a war of extermination being fought against her country, a world that could not quite accommodate what she was, and simply refused to accept any of the limitations being imposed on her. Not loudly, not with performance, with patience and precision, which had always been her gifts. The man who asked about her cap did not know who he was talking to. He found out. If this story moved you, subscribe to follow the Untold Front. New stories every week.